paradrama tales.
My mom threw me out at 16 to raise her new kids. I slept on my grandparents' couch, worked nights, and built a life from nothing. Now that I'm rich, she came back to ask me to pay for their college. But what happened on my porch changed everything. You ever feel like you're haunting your own life? That's what it felt like growing up in that house. I wasn't abused, not in the way people think of it. There were no bruises or screaming matches, just silence, distance, erasure. I was her firstborn, raised in a garage apartment, with help from my grandparents tucked into bed, with bedtime stories kissed on the forehead, after long days of her classes and shifts. I remember those days like faded photos, small, warm, blurry. And then Leonard came along, and everything changed. He wasn't a bad man, just a man who didn't see me. My mom fell into his orbit like a satellite, and I became background noise. The dinner table grew quieter. Conversations shifted from, how was school, to, Leonard had a long day. I remember sitting there with my report card straight. A's, waiting for a good job. But the only thing I got was, can you keep it down? When the twins came, I thought maybe I'd matter again. I pictured myself as the proud big brother, the helper. But what I became was an extra mouth to feed, a budget problem, an obstacle. My name stopped being mentioned in baby prep. The family calendar had birthdays except mine, and slowly I realized I was fading, like I'd been cropped out of the family photo. I worked harder, cleaned the kitchen without being asked, studied late into the night hoping they'd notice. But no matter how good I was, I couldn't compete with the new family she chose to build. I was the ghost of her past, someone she wanted to forget. And at 16, when she and Leonard sat me down with their tough decision, they didn't cry. They didn't even hesitate. You'll figure it out, she said. That's what hurt the most. Not the betrayal, not the eviction. But how easy it was for her to let go, like I was never her child, like I was a placeholder until the real family arrived. And as I walked out with a single duffel bag, I didn't just leave my childhood home. I left behind the illusion that I was still her son. The night they kicked me out, it didn't start with shouting. It started with dinner, quiet, bland, like always. Leonard was reading something on his tablet. My mom was bouncing one of the twins on her hip, and I was clearing dishes trying to make myself useful, like always. Then she said it. Can you sit down for a minute? That tone, flat, tense, no warmth. I knew something was coming. Leonard folded his hands like a manager about to conduct a performance review. We've been thinking about the future, he began. Things are tight. College savings for the twins, groceries, childcare expenses are growing. And my mom cut in. We just can't support 3 kids anymore. You're older, independent. Independent, I was 16. I didn't even have a driver's license. Leonard continued. It's not about you. It's just, the twins, they deserve more. That line. They deserve more. It landed like a stone in my chest. More than what? More than me. I sat there frozen, staring at the beige carpet, the fraying edge where my feet always tucked under the couch. This was the same room where I used to build Lego castles, where Mom once helped me with school projects late into the night. Now it felt like a courtroom, and I was being sentenced. I understand, I said. My voice didn't shake. I don't know how. I didn't beg, didn't cry. I think part of me had already seen this coming for a long time. I packed that night, a duffel bag with some clothes, my old phone charger, the cracked photo of me and my mom from 2nd grade, back when she still smiled at me like I was her world. No one helped me pack. No one followed me to the door. You'll land on your feet, Leonard said, not unkindly, just hollow. My mom didn't say anything, just watched from the hallway, arms crossed like she couldn't wait for the space I'd leave behind. And when I stepped out into the night, I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently. Because deep down, I think I was still hoping she'd run after me, that she'd say it was all a mistake, that she loved me. But the door stayed shut, and so did she. When I showed up at my grandparents' house that night, duffel bag slung over my shoulder and silence in my throat, my grandpa answered the door, and he didn't ask a single question. He just stepped aside and said, "You hungry?" I nodded even though I wasn't. But that's how he showed love, through plates and leftovers, not long speeches. My grandma appeared a minute later, hair in curlers, eyes wide with confusion. "What happened?" she whispered. But the second she saw the look on my face, her arms opened wide, and I stepped into them, like it was the only safe place left in the world. They didn't have much. A small house with old wallpaper and creaky floorboards. A fridge light that flickered when it opened, like even the electricity had to decide whether to keep going or not. But it was home, and I was safe. They were retired, living off Social Security and a modest pension. There wasn't extra money lying around, but they gave me what they could. A mattress on the floor, dinner at 6, and the kind of attention that says you matter, even when it's inconvenient. But I knew they couldn't carry me, so I got a job. The coffee shop down the street was hiring part-time help, and I lied about my age just to get in. The uniform was 2 sizes too big. The hours were brutal, but that first paycheck, $136 after taxes, felt like winning the lottery. I bought my own school supplies, my own socks, even saved enough to buy a mini fridge for my room. It was nothing fancy, just big enough for a soda, some leftovers, and a few string cheeses. But every time I opened it and saw food I had paid for, it felt like proof that I wasn't gone, just getting started. School got harder. I'd finish shifts at 11 p.m., then come home and do homework at the kitchen table while the clock ticked and my grandma snored in the next room. I was exhausted, but I kept showing up because I'd already learned when the people who are supposed to love you don't, you find a way to love yourself through effort, resilience, and the cold glow of a fridge light you paid for yourself. Senior year came fast. Between caffeine-fueled mornings and late-night study marathons, I somehow pulled myself into the top quarter of my class. College brochures started showing up in the mail, colorful pamphlets with smiling students and perfectly trimmed quads. I stared at each one like it was a life raft I wasn't sure I deserved. But reality hits different when the application fees alone make you choose between printing an essay or buying lunch. My guidance counselor told me, "You've got the grades, you've got the story, you'll get in." And she was right, I did. But getting in was the easy part. Paying for it. That was the war I hadn't prepared for. So, one night, maybe the hardest night, I sat at my grandparents' kitchen table, the same one where I'd done algebra and cried into microwave spaghetti, and I typed out a message I never thought I'd write. "Hey, I got accepted into a few colleges. Could you maybe help me with the loan stuff?" Simple, hopeful, almost gentle. I rewrote it 7 times, deleted it, rewrote it again, hit send, and waited. Hours passed, midnight, then 1 a.m., then the response. One word, no. No explanation, no encouragement, no. Sorry. Just a brutal barefaced no. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. Not because I didn't expect it. Deep down, I think I always knew. But seeing it in writing, from your own mother, it was like being kicked twice. First when she threw me out. Now when she confirmed without hesitation that I wasn't worth the effort. I didn't cry. Not then. I just turned off the phone and sat there while the fridge hummed in the background. That soft, steady sound, reminding me of the small light that had gotten me this far. She wasn't going to show up for me. She'd made her decision years ago. But the woman who had co-signed nothing, given nothing, and called me nothing, she no longer had power over what I'd become. I was still going to college, even if I had to drag myself every step of the way. I didn't step into college like some bright-eyed freshman ready to party. I stepped in like a man hauling brick student loans on one shoulder, a promise to my aunt on the other. She'd co-signed those loans without hesitation, told me to chase this future like it owed me something. And so I did. My dorm room was barely bigger than a walk-in closet, and my mattress felt like it came from a 1940s military surplus. But to me, it was sanctuary. It was the first space in years that was mine, just mine. Between classes I worked, cafeteria trays, weekend landscaping gigs, library shifts. I even taught myself basic web design, in my free hours building terrible websites for local shops until I got better. I wasn't sleeping much, but I was surviving, and I was building something brick by invisible brick. Most kids around me had parents calling to check in, sending care packages, dropping off clean laundry after every break. Me, I had my aunt's voice in my head, reminding me that belief isn't always loud, but it's always there. She checked in weekly, always asking what I needed, always ending with, "You've got this. Just keep going." By junior year, I was running my own small freelance business online. Seniors started asking me how I balanced it all. Professors recommended me for internships. And somewhere along the line, without realizing it, I'd gone from barely scraping by to building momentum. After graduation, I didn't party. I suited up for my first job in a small marketing firm, entry-level, low pay, But it was a start. I stayed late, volunteered for the projects no one wanted, and when they asked for ideas, I didn't whisper, I shared them like I belonged. 2 promotions later, I moved to a mid-sized company, and from there up again. By 30, I was in upper management. Not flashy, not viral, just steady, quiet growth. I didn't post about it online. I didn't flaunt the paychecks or the job title. Because for me, success wasn't about showing off. It was about reclaiming every "you're on your own" I'd ever heard and turning it into a life I'd built with no applause, no shortcuts, and no regrets. It started with a knock I didn't expect. A weekday afternoon, just after I'd gotten home from a long strategy meeting. I still had my blazer on my phone in hand halfway through replying to an email when I heard it 3 short knocks. I opened the door, and time seemed to bend. There they were, my mom and Leonard. They looked smaller, not physically, but in presence, like years had pressed them down in ways life never managed to do when I was a kid. My mom's smile was tight. Leonard didn't smile at all. "Can we come in?" she asked. I didn't move. "Why are you here?" Leonard brushed past me like it was still his house. My mom followed him in, looking around like she was gauging the cost of every piece of furniture. I stood there, letting the silence do the work. "We heard about your promotion." Leonard started matter of fact, like it was small talk. "Sounds like you're doing well, real well." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you want?" No warm-up, no pretense. Just this: "The twins are starting college, and we've hit a rough patch. We were thinking you could help." His words hung in the air like smoke. I blinked. "Help how?" My mom stepped forward, voice soft. "They've been accepted into good schools, but we can't cover all the costs. If you could help with tuition, just the first year, it would mean the world." Leonard did the math. It would come out to about $100,000. You wouldn't even notice it, that last line. That's what did it. I wouldn't even notice it. They hadn't called when I graduated. Never once visited during college. Didn't send a card, a text, a whisper of acknowledgement. And now they were standing in my living room, asking me to cover 6 figures for kids they replaced me with. I laughed, quiet at first, then louder. Not because it was funny, but because it was surreal. "I worked for every cent I have," I said, voice steady. "And you too? You're just here to take." Leonard stiffened. "Don't be dramatic. They're your siblings." "No," I said calmly. "They're your responsibility. Just like I was, until I wasn't convenient anymore." They had asked for money. What I gave them instead was the door. A week passed. I thought that scene in my living room was the finale. I truly did. But narcissism doesn't like being told no, especially when it's dressed up in parental guilt and entitlement. That's why one Wednesday evening after work, I pulled into my driveway and saw my mother standing there, alone, pacing. The way she turned toward my car when I opened the door, it wasn't relief. It was accusation, her eyes already wild. "We need to talk," she said sharply, marching toward me like I was the child again, and this was her domain. "You think you can ignore me, turn your back on your family? After everything I've done for you, I didn't even respond." I just walked toward my front door, calm but alert. She followed, shouting louder with each step. "You ungrateful little brat. I worked myself to the bone for you. I raised you." "No," I said, turning around. "You threw me out. You raised the twins. You erased me." That hit a nerve. She screamed shrill, guttural, unhinged. Neighbors started peeking out from their windows, front doors cracking open like curious eyes. Then she lunged, tried to grab my phone, screaming, "Don't you dare call the police on your own mother." But I already was. I backed up and kept the line open, giving the dispatcher my address as my mother flailed, cursing, sobbing, throwing guilt like daggers. And then, salvation sirens. The police arrived in under 5 minutes. My mother didn't calm down, not at all. She pointed at me and wailed about betrayal, about abandonment, about how I owed her everything. The officers separated us immediately. One gently guided her to the sidewalk, while another stood between us and asked what happened. My voice shook, but I told the truth. From the workplace ambush to her showing up, uninvited, everything. The officer nodded, taking notes, glancing at my mom, who was now crying into her hands, murmuring, "I'm his mother. I'm his mother." They offered to take her in or help me file for a protective order. I didn't hesitate. The next morning, I walked into the police station and filed the report. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was tired, just tired. It wasn't the yelling that broke me. It was the moment I realized this wasn't my mother anymore, just a stranger with my childhood in her hand, squeezing it until it cracked. I thought that was the end of the story. After the restraining order was granted, after the neighborhood scene with sirens and shouting, after I finally said the words out loud, "You're not my family," I believed the chapter had closed. I wasn't looking back. I wasn't checking their Facebooks. I wasn't wondering anymore. And then one night, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, simple message. "Hey, it's Max. Can we talk?" I froze. Max, my half-brother. One of the twins. One of the very reasons I was erased. We barely knew each other. I left when he was still in kindergarten. Every memory I had of him was soft and blurry. A giggle from down the hallway. A high chair. A toy left in the living room that I always tripped over. But nothing beyond that. Nothing that felt like brotherhood. I didn't answer right away. I stared at the message for a long time, my heart pacing like it remembered something I didn't. Was this another trap? Was my mother using him to get in again? And then another message came. "You're my brother, and I don't know you at all. I'd like to change that." I called, I don't know why. Maybe curiosity, maybe caution, maybe that thin thread of hope I thought I'd severed. His voice was deeper than I expected, nervous but steady. "I know what they did to you," he said. "I didn't understand it back then, but I do now. And I hate that their choices kept us apart." I sat there stunned. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't making excuses. He was just acknowledging the truth. We talked for a while. I kept it guarded, but I listened. He wasn't pretending the past didn't happen. He was recognizing it. And more than that, he wanted to build something new. Not fix the broken, just connect. As brothers. Before we hung up, he said, "I don't expect anything from you. I just don't want us to be strangers forever." And in that moment, something in me softened. Not forgiveness, not forgetting. But a small, cautious door creaked open. Because sometimes the family that hurt you the most is not the only family you have. Looking back now, I used to think healing would come from an apology, from hearing the words, "I'm sorry," fall from the lips of the people who broke me. But it never came, and I stopped needing it. Because healing didn't show up with a spotlight or some grand gesture. It showed up in quieter ways, like my aunt's unwavering belief, like my grandparents' second chance, like Max, a voice I barely knew, choosing to reach out not for guilt or gain, but simply to say, "You matter." I spent so many years focused on who left, who forgot me, who chose their comfort over my presence. But that night on the porch, with the envelope in my aunt's hand and tears in her eyes, I realized who shows up matters more than who walks away. It's not about blood. It's not about obligation. It's about who sees you when you're invisible, who listens when no one else does, who chooses you again and again, not because they have to, but because they want to. So, if you're watching this and still carrying the ache of abandonment, look around. The ones who stayed, even if they're few, that's your real family. And if you're ready for more stories that remind you of your worth of resilience and of the quiet power in choosing yourself, stick around. Because the next story might just be yours. Subscribe, stay, and let's keep telling the truth together.